Hello and welcome to Page One, the Writers' Podcast. I'm Marco.
I'm Tarek.
And wait, Tarek, who's this?
Oh, it's Timmy! I've been released from the cupboard of dispatching Page Ones for a special appearance on the Page One podcast.
Tim is, you may have heard if you've listened to the podcast before, we have referred to the boss in quotes, and Tim is that man.
Or legend. The myth.
I don't think we've called you legend.
The man, the legend.
I obviously haven't listened to all of them yet.
Tarek, this is one of a special series of episodes we've recorded at the Fringe with comedians to find out about their writing process for their stand-up shows. And we recorded these at a variety of venues across Edinburgh. So the sound quality does vary at times. We sometimes recorded them at the venues themselves. But Tarek wasn't able to make all of the interviews, so Tim kindly agreed to step in.
Interviewer extraordinaire.
Yes, and I think, Tarek, you're out of a job.
I've been waiting 112 episodes for this day. I'm finally free.
Well, you've not heard my ones yet, so we'll see how that goes.
We'll see how it goes with the listeners. But yeah, we will get straight into these special episodes. We're releasing at least one a day this week. They're very short episodes, but hopefully very interesting and funny, of course. And we'll play a quick advert for our writer's notebook, and then we'll get straight into the interview.
But for now, on with the podcast.
See you later.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realise it's not just a story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
Hello and welcome to this special episode of Page One, the Writers' Podcast at the Fringe. I'm Marco.
And I'm Tarek. And
today we're joined by Michael Spicer. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Obviously you've got a show at the Edinburgh Fringe this year, but I think it's fair to say that you're best known for your Man in the Room Next Door sketches. And before that, you were working in comedy anyway. Is comedy something that you always wanted to end up working in?
Yes, it's not by choice. It's just something in my DNA. I was just always influenced by comedians, not necessarily stand-up comedians, but comedians in film, like Laurel and Hardy growing up. Massively important part of my childhood because we only had 4 channels when I was young. And and they seemed to use Laurel and Hardy films as a sort of filler to fill up the schedules and glue programs to other programs. And this was just for a young boy, this was just genius at work. I really loved watching them. And then, yeah, it was just basically whatever, because I was 10 in 1987, and that was when, you saw quite a shift towards alternative comedy and just younger voices having more of a say in the comedy world. And I was massively influenced by that. And I don't know what it is, but comedy was always the main influence. I never really was interested in any other genre.
And so how did you actually get into it then?
It's an interesting one, really, because obviously when I was when I was in college, let's just say after I left school, I was starting to write things and sending them to the only two outlets, which were the BBC and ITV. And maybe there were a few fledgling production companies back then, because we're talking about the mid-1990s or even earlier than that.
Yeah.
Pre-internet. So I was sending things, physical documents I was sending in the post. And so for the sort of 20 years plus after that, I was having to get regular work, regular jobs, and doing comedy on the side. It never paid the bills, and it hasn't done until my 42nd birthday, basically. And I had a regular paid job all the way up until that. And I was just doing stuff on the side, entering competitions, entering stand-up competitions, because basically there was, back then, there were no avenues. Without social media, I still wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. I created my own platform that people, came to. And in the previous 20 years, I had to ask people if I could join their platform, if I could be part of their programming or whatever. So it's only fairly recently that I can call myself a comedian or a writer, because up until 2019, I was all sorts of various things like copywriter, researcher, archivist. I did all manner of jobs.
And when you were sending the stuff in to BBC, ITV, that sort of thing, was it sort of ideas for sketches? Was it, what sort of thing were you writing at that point?
I was writing tosh. Let's just get that off the ground. When I was like 17, I came up with all sorts of ideas for sitcoms and things that I didn't have any passion for, but I felt they would enjoy. I would thought, this would reach your demographic. So I would come up with all sorts of silly sitcom ideas that never got off the ground. But all the time I was obviously developing my writing style and trying to find out what my voice was, because a lot of the time I was just aping things I was seeing. Mm-hmm. I was just so heavily influenced by comedians that I would just replicate what they were doing. Wherever there was an opportunity, I would try to grab it. So whenever there was that call from topical sketch shows for submissions, then I would just be in on that straight away. But I didn't feel that was my strength, that I needed to find something that was more about me. But I can remember going to the BBC when I was about 18. I don't know if you know about a program called Week Ending. It was on Radio 4. No, because you're too young. It was on Radio 4, and it was their version of Spitting Image. It was their end of the week topical comedy sketch show. Yeah. And the turnover, as you can imagine, to produce stuff literally on the day of broadcast, very tense. And they would have a core group of writers, but then on a Wednesday afternoon, you could literally walk into the BBC off the street, and you could say, I want to go to the week ending meeting. and the security guard would just let you through. You'd go to wherever it was. There'd be a room full of middle-aged men looking very unhappy, and then the producer would come in and say, "This week it's John Major did this, blah blah blah. There's been a war in the Middle East, blah blah blah." And then you'd make the notes and go away and write it, and then you'd literally have to sort of fax it to them, literally on that day or the day after. And I remember sort of going to that and being really intimidated. I actually took my sister with me. I was so shy, and but I just thought, I want to be part of this world. I'm not sure how, but I want to be part of this world. And little did I know that at that time that the invention of the internet and the invention of social media would just give me my space.
Yeah.
And the doors opened once the audiences came my way. And that was incredibly satisfying, I have to say. And I imagine it is for thousands of people making content online. And
obviously the Man in the Room Next Door was a huge hit. It was massive all over social media. And where did the idea from that come around? Was that something you'd be kind of mulling over for a while?
No.
Was it something that popped into your head one day?
It popped into my head. I was on Twitter for 10 years up to that point, and I was doing sketches that were doing okay. Sometimes they would go viral and, people moved on. Nothing really took hold. And then, and I think it's probably the accumulation of terrible things that had happened at that point. So you'd had 3 years of Brexit, you've got Trump, and now you've got Boris Johnson wanting to be leader of the Conservative Party, as it was at that time. And he then had to do these, extremely inflated interviews where he had to talk about everything in order to, we're seeing it now.
Yeah.
Where they have to talk about absolutely everything to just kind of, stake your claim. And he was only up against Jeremy Hunt at the time. And so he was giving an interview with Talk Radio, which was fairly sort of celebratory. It was like a victorious tone. And the guy, Ross Kempsell, right at the very end, said very, very quickly, some stuff on your personal life. What do you do to relax? And so he then said, he didn't say anything. So he was caught in two minds. He thought, shall I say what I do in my spare time? Or shall I lie? Shall I make up something that I think people would relate to? Which is why he came up with a sort of arts and crafts sort of response. Yeah. And so he said, yes, I make, after literally 30 seconds of going, he said, I make model buses. So it then went viral because, honestly, what a jaw-droppingly stupid thing to say. Because a normal human being, if you ask a normal human being what they do in their spare time, they will answer you instantly because they're a human being with emotion and heart and a brain. And he just, blasted his way through a stupid answer. And it went viral. I was at work at the time, and I had my Twitter feed on one screen and I had my work on the other screen. And this bus thing just kept coming up. Vroom, vroom, can you believe this? Vroom, vroom, vroom. And so I watched it, and instantly I just thought, it feels like he's so distant, and he's looking off and he's saying It feels like he's expecting an answer to be fed to him through an earpiece by an advisor who would probably have something prepared. So I thought, right, well, if I've got time in the evening, I'll do it, because when I get home from work, I'm usually very tired, and I've got 2 boys to put to bed and all of this business. And I thought, if I've got time, I'll do it. But because I was on the fence about doing it, because I thought, how can you parody something that is so unbelievably awful in the first instance? But I had some time, which is literally why all I'm doing is sitting on my sofa in my living room. I get a box file, and that is literally the most. That's the prop. That's the prop and set design. A box file, and it's at that weird angle because I didn't even have a tripod back then. I just balanced my phone against a pile of my children's books. So it was very much an afterthought, and I put it on late at night, which is something, any influencer, which I hate, of course, that term, but any influencer or anybody on social media will tell you that putting something on late at night is a no, a no. So you put it on sort of as they're going to work or something like that. But I didn't really think much of it, so I just put it on before I went to bed, and then woke up and I'd got 1 million views. So it was, it took me completely by surprise.
And yeah, obviously since then it's gone massive. You've been on the James Corden show in America and all sorts of things. So I mean, you can't have expected the success, but really, and obviously you have to be thankful to Boris Johnson in a way, I guess. For
I mean,
success.
there's a horrible thought that creeps into my mind from time to time. Would you prefer a government that is actually doing good and remaining anonymous, or having this, grotesque freak show in charge?
I know,
having material on a daily basis.
Well, I was going to say, they certainly give you enough to work with.
I also said this that a while back when I was doing Priti Patel. I try to imagine being in my shoes. You're a comedy writer. 70% of the writing has already been written. You just have to join the dots, and your comedy writer partner doesn't want to take any credit for it. Right? So that's the position I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm joining the dots here. It's just, they provide me with these gifts.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, his daily press briefings, it was like stand-up.
Yeah.
It was like somebody watching having a breakdown and a stand-up routine at the same time.
Yeah.
So, it is in many ways, it's a hard job because I have to do everything myself. But if you look at it from another perspective, wow, this they'll keep opening their mouths and this will keep happening.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
And how? So I mean, as you're just saying, they give you the material, and there's plenty of material to pick from. Unfortunately, in some ways. But when that happens, I mean, how long does it take you to put one of these things together? How much writing is there, or are you just sort of playing it off the cuff almost with some of it?
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about that, because there can sometimes be a narrative to the clip. So there's a particular moment where Boris Johnson has memorized paragraph 5B of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. He's memorized it, and he says, and he's thinking, this is what we need to avoid all the pitfalls that Brexit might bring about. And so the interviewer just says, what about paragraph 5C though? And he hasn't read paragraph 5C, clearly. So there's this moment where he's just saying, well, it's 5B, which is actually the most important thing. And I totally rely on 5B to get us through. And he says, yeah, but what about 5C? It's really important. And he says, it's back and forth. And he says, have you read 5C? And he says, no. And so it's a lovely little potted moment that I can puncture with my frantic advisor.
Yeah.
And he said, he completely flies off the handle and smashes a bottle off the desk and stuff. And I make sure that things like that are almost like choreographed. So it's really nice. And I like things like that working out, because basically I did that on my day off, and I got it done in a day. And that's the crucial thing. When a interview like that happens, you've got to get it written and made within 24 hours, 48 hours maybe, because it just goes off the boil.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there are other things like Dominic Cummings defending himself in the Rose Garden, going through in excruciating detail his journey and how he wasn't breaking the law, even though in that press conference he sort of mentions that he did break the law maybe 5 or 6 times. So it's like it's just this massive, thing to unpick. Like, well, shall I use that? Shall I use that? And it became this massive thing, and I didn't know how to cut it down. And in the end, I ended up doing a sort of massive extended one that you can only watch on YouTube, because that was the nature of that particular moment.
And they kind of grew so big that they ended up with you writing a book, The Secret Political Advisor, which is it's kind of laid out as a series of letters and diary entries and stuff. And what was it like writing that? And was it quite a fun process, I imagine?
Yeah, very enjoyable. That was getting that deal was like the sign to me. It said, okay, you can quit your job now. Yeah, you can quit your job and focus on this. Okay. So I quit my job as a copywriter. And then 10 days later, we went into lockdown. So I had 10 days of, pretty enjoyable freelancing. and then I became a really bad homeschooling teacher. So most of the time was spent trying to get my 8-year-old to, understand Greek mythology, which I really did not want to do at all. And then I'd have to write the book in the evening, and that's the thing. I've never written in the evening. I've always written during the day. I never do. Never find it flows in the evening for me. Mm-hmm. So I had to get into that groove of writing chunks of the book in the evening. But the material was all there. I've done it. I wrote the book so that it covers 2016 to 2020. So that sort of the departure of Cameron, Theresa May coming in, Brexit happening, Trump happening, all these terrible things. I thought, well, if I put him at the center of that storm, then you've got a pretty decent comedy book. Yeah. And so I would just visit the Guardian's archives, newspaper archives, and see what was happening on a particular day. And then just think about where the advisor might be on during a particular event. And so it kind of flowed really nicely, and I really enjoyed writing it, even though I'd never written a book before.
And with that, and with even your with the sketches themselves, do you just rely on your instinct, as it were, or do you run it past anyone? Do you show anyone? Do you say, check if it's working?
I don't. I've never done that. I've only. I will sometimes run a particular insult maybe past my wife to see if it works. Yeah. Sometimes insults are funny things, because I've imposed this rule upon myself not to swear. So I kind of replace swear words with just everyday words. And sometimes they're funny and sometimes they're not. And I don't know unless my wife tells me, because it's a brand new thing you're introducing. So, but I've spoken about this in the past. Since I was a child, I've not been able to share my love of comedy or anything like that with anyone else. Yeah, so I've had this real problem of just being completely controlling, and everything I do, I have to. If I come up with the idea, then I have to see it through, from acting, direction, editing, posting it. And when I was young, I found boys and girls on my wavelength, but I didn't want to collaborate with them. I didn't want to produce stuff with them. I didn't want to make stuff with them. it was, and that still remains today. I find it very difficult. I do run things, but if I'm working on something that has a producer, obviously I'll run it past the producer. Yeah. But if I'm doing stuff on social media, I will just put it out there sometimes and just gauge reaction. Because as I say, it's the turnover is so quick. And if you're doing something, if you're making a joke about something that is in the news, then it has to be now.
Yeah.
So I just do it, you know.
And you're here at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival at the moment. Why don't you tell us what your show's about and how it compares to the sketch stuff that people have seen online?
Well, the show is. I've done a tour with this show, and it was an hour and a half show, and I've condensed it into 60 minutes for this run. And what I decided, because I knew that the room next door would not sustain a whole show, so what I've done is I've provided a little bit of insight into him as a person, how he got started. There are shots of me coaching football managers and pop stars and working my way up to politicians. And then there's a moment where I talk about my grandfather coaching Winston Churchill, because I found this clip of Winston Churchill's rushes when he was doing a speech.
Brilliant.
So perfect, and I've chopped that up. So you find out a little bit more about his history. You find out about him when COVID first happens and having to deal with these daily press briefings. So there's that, and there's obviously, and I bounce off video projections that I've edited so that there's gaps left, and I interact with those video projections. But that's 50% of the show. The other 50% is me talking about making comedy under the radar for 20 years and not really getting much attention. Mm-hmm. But there have been instances in the past where I have gone viral, but nobody knew it was me. I've inadvertently hoaxed Twitter for a day with some sketch or joke that I've done. And I talk about that, and I talk about the things that have influenced me, and I talk about things that I've found online that I think is hilarious and I like to share with people. So there's quite a lot in there that I've crammed in there that I think is quite an entertaining show, hopefully. Cool. But the tour went really well, so yeah.
It definitely sounds like the character. I like how you kind of create this character. And now you're kind of fleshing him out in his own right, and he's kind of got his own history and stuff. And it's and it's kind of a mix between him and yourself, and this kind of real and fake version. So yeah, it sounds like quite an unusual show, but I do like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I've been included in a lot of top 10 political shows you have to go and see in Edinburgh. And, I do feel a bit of a fraud. I don't really see myself as a satirist at all. I do see myself as a comedian and a writer first. And I think that's what this show is. I'm trying to say with this show is that there is more to me than this character, because he does have a shelf life. And, and I have more sketches, more of a back catalogue in more obscure stuff. And, obviously I won't be doing him. At some point I will not be doing him. I've stopped doing him as regularly as I used to. And, there is more that I want to do. I want to, write short films. I want to do, I've written features, and I've got, ideas for TV that I'd like to do that have nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with Room Next Door, because I think that's a far more interesting path to take.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that if you did have what your plans were, but you want to move into more. Is it more sort of scripted sort of stuff that you would like to move into?
Yeah, I wrote something. I wrote a feature film when I was working as a copywriter in my lunch break. That's probably about 200 lunch breaks if you add it all together. Mm-hmm. That I'm very, very passionate about, and I've tried to get off the ground for a long time, and it's only now, of course, that people are willing to read it, because that's just the nature of it, isn't it? And that remains something I desperately want to write and direct and make. I think that there's room for, original British comedy films that aren't broad, that are interesting.
Yeah.
Something like The Lobster, or what Chris Morris is doing. I think that is ultimately where I want to be. Yeah.
Just before we close up, you mentioned at the start that obviously there are now these other platforms for people that do want to get into comedy. You, as you said, sort of created your own platform there. I suppose the one thing with there being so many options now is standing out or getting found in the morass of everything. I mean, is it luck? Is there something you can do to try and stand out, or
well, I think that my show talks about that, and I'm not really in tune with what's going on in the news all the time. I don't read newspapers and I don't watch the news. What I do is I have a feed which has intelligent people's tweeting about stuff that might interest me, that I click on an article and read it. So things that have made me stand out in the past, and which gave me my tiny cult following, the tiniest of cult followings in my first 10 years on Twitter, was based on stuff that I was doing because of things that were in the news. And it didn't necessarily need to be politics. Like, for instance, there was this big backlash against Phil Neville. I don't know whether you know your football. Well, you kind of do, because I can see something on the background there. Exactly. But anyway, Phil Neville was made a pundit in 2014, I think, by the BBC, and there was this big backlash that he was incredibly dull and very monotone, and he was just basically saying what was, rather than providing analysis, he was just saying what you were seeing, kind of like catchphrase, really. And then I decided to do an impression of Phil Neville commentating on Game of Thrones during a battle. And it did okay for the day, it got a bit of press attention and probably got me 1,000 followers, It's about finding something that exists, that the viewer will know about, or that the user will know about before going into it. So obviously I've taken Phil Neville, football, Game of Thrones, taken those two things that we both know about and mixed them together. And I suppose that was quite a cynical ploy from me to do that, because I didn't really have any interest in either of those things. But I just did my research. And I have spent years doing, just check my YouTube channel, there's 10 years there, or 12 years of really dark, weird, obscure stuff that I thought would gain traction, but did not. Mm-hmm. But I am still really proud of it, because I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. Mm-hmm. But it won't go viral, because it's too offbeat, it's too weird. Get your audience, keep them there, and then bleed your weird stuff in and see if they get it. So I think my early stuff was really a way of getting attention on social media, and drawing people towards what I was doing. Yeah.
And it sounds like if this is something that people want to get into, then it's a case of just continuing to stick at it as well, and just putting the content out over, because there will be a point of something will click, or there'll be a timing element, or something will happen which will bleed over.
Yes, I think if you were to look in the dictionary, sticking at it as a term, there would be my face staring back at you, because as I say, I was 17 when I was first sending sitcoms to London weekend television, as it was back then, and I'm now 45. So this has happened fairly recently. Lots of things lots of things happened that were telling me I should keep at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the most obvious thing is when you do a sketch, it gets 10 likes, but one of those likes is like a comedian that you respect and admire. Suddenly you think, right, I definitely deserve to be sat at this table. I just don't know what the right vehicle is yet.
Yeah.
So all those things were reassuring me throughout my 20s and 30s. But I just didn't break through, which is incredibly depressing. It is very depressing. You know, the amount of rejections I got over those years, my God, I mean, you know, you could really... P.G. Woodhouse apparently wallpapered his spare room with these rejection letters. I could have done that with several rooms. Maybe my whole house, I don't know. But it didn't really... Once you get over those initial rejections... It was like, you know, you just grew that thicker skin, and I've always been, you know, a creative person. I wouldn't go, oh well, that's that then, you know. But the next day I would have another idea, and I'd work on that idea, and I'd think, yeah, okay, let's see if this gains traction. And I've never had writer's block, so it was always just a case of just keeping going. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I can well imagine that a lot of people in my shoes would have gone, you know what, maybe this wasn't the right path to take.
Yeah.
Well, where and when can people see you at the Fringe?
Oh, that's a good question. Bear with me. No, the only reason I do this is because it's a slightly convoluted description. Assembly George Square Studios.
Okay.
Studio 1, August 19th to the 28th at 20 to 4 every day in that run. So yes, should be good.
Excellent.
Awesome. And the very, very last thing, worst or best heckle you've ever received?
Well, this is the thing. I've been asked this before, but I've never been heckled because I'm in a very privileged position in as much as I've only ever been on stage as part of my tour, and people have come to see me. They haven't. They're not.
Yeah, they're not there.
They're not. They're not. They're not there to give me a hard time.
It sounds like it's a kind of show where it's not really. You're kind of watching clips and chatting about stuff, and it sounds like quite a nice atmosphere.
Yeah, there's a very, very nice, warm, friendly atmosphere. Sometimes I get my insults hurled back at me. But I'm an online comedian, so I think my comments are probably my heckles.
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't read comments for my own mental health.
No,
so the great thing about that is I don't know how loathed I am because I don't read them.
Well, I can't stand you, so.
There you go.
I knew it. I had this feeling.
It's the only reason I agreed to this talk. So
okay, yeah, fine.
Thanks very much, Michael.
My pleasure, thank you.
That was fantastic fun.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening and join us for the next episode.
See you later.